Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artists Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier with another podcast, In Focus podcast, featuring a Fairhaven photographer, and we'll learn a lot more about them. This particular podcast has been graciously funded by the Fairhaven Local Cultural Council, part of the Mass Cultural Council. And with that in mind, I'm going to ask our guest, as I always do, to introduce themselves and spell their name for us.
My name's Dana Morris. It's DANA MORRIS.
Any bizarre occurrences with your name? Because even sometimes the simplest names can confuse people quite a bit.
It's funny because I have a lot of connections with Spanish-speaking people, and they do not like the A at the end of Dana. It's a woman's name. And so I've conceded to them, and when I introduce myself in Spanish now, it's Dana Pablo.
Dana Pablo.
I just throw my middle name in there, and it makes them a lot more comfortable.
A lot more comfortable. Yeah, it is. It's quite, interesting because obviously everything feminine is with an A and everything masculine is with an
Right.
O.
Exactly.
And if you think about that from an idiomatic, diagrammatic thing, it's actually as backwards, but that's another subject for another time. And I would have never thought that. So you're a Fairhaven-based photographer.
Yes.
Tell us all about it, all the way back from day one. We got time?
Oh my God. Yeah, no, I started taking photographs when I was probably about 13 or 14. I grew up in Holliston. So the real big deal to get my first camera. I think I was all 15 or 16 when I had my own 35 millimeter camera, and started taking photographs, and have been taking photographs ever since. I've traveled extensively, so a lot of travel photographs from both work and pleasure.
How did you get started? I mean, other than professionally, obviously we already know that. And with a lot of photographers, it seems like they were, and I refer to it as bitten by the bug early on in life.
Yeah. I just actually fell in love with macro photography at first, just close-up lenses, and taking close-up images of leaves and frost and all kinds of things like that. And that's what I was really attracted to in high school. I traveled to Europe my second year in college, and part of what I did was take photographs, but I was totally focused on reflections and almost like a Picasso-like view of the world, the cubist kind of. So I did a lot of images through mirrors, through windows, that type of thing, where you're dealing with 2 or 3 different levels of reality, and still have some of those photographs and really love them. They've taken on some time at this point, but I have one that's I really enjoy it. It's a woman and her daughter looking at me through a train, and my friend is sitting next to me reading a book, and it's all one image. So.
Okay, how did you pull that one off? Is it a reflection of you taking the
reflection,
photograph with your friend, and then them? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but I did a lot of photography like that. And then came home from being in Europe and started working at Channel 27 out in Worcester. So that's where I learned more formal, taking photographs for advertising and that type of thing, formal lighting. Learned a lot about lighting in that position. And then, at this point, it's funny because I use the sun as a single source of light for images I do this time of year of flowers, amaryllis specifically. And through reflections and white walls and cards placed specifically, I can get more than one light source coming in and illuminating the flower. So I don't need to cut it.
a lot of bounce light then.
Exactly.
Yeah. Going back to the advertising photography, two things I learned while I was, advertising was my bread and butter.
Yes.
Was not everybody can shoot food and not everybody can shoot jewelry.
Yeah, that's right.
And some of the people, what was his name? Roland Gerard? It was a French last name. He was out of Providence. The guy had a massive studio, and this guy could shoot jewelry because Attleboro was
Nice. Yeah,
actually
of course.
the
Yes.
jewelry capital
Yes,
of New
that's
England.
right. Yes. Yeah.
Providence took that credit, but it was Attleboro where all
Yep.
the work was being done. And what was it? The camera doesn't lie, but people use it to lie.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely you can change an image and crop an image and influence how that is perceived.
Yeah, years ago in the Standard Times, on the front page, the headline read something like "High School Riot," and it showed a fight going on in the parking lot, and it really got everybody, all spun up.
Yeah.
And in actuality, it was a cropped photograph, because if you pull back to the original, or as they refer to it now, capture today, it was actually just 5 or 6 kids around one car.
Yeah, right. No, yeah, most definitely. It was funny on social media last week. I saw this hilarious piece. It was on TikTok of a golden retriever looking through a fence at a ball, and then the camera pulled out, and the gate was open right next to the golden retriever. But you didn't know that when you first started looking.
Now, okay, so this idea about reflections in kind of I guess you could say it's a distorted reality.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm presenting it. Yeah.
What got you? What caught your? What caught your eye, so to speak?
It's funny because it was a right turn. I actually, in high school, I was doing portrait photography and learning about that. And my freshman year in college at Framingham State, I was doing a lot of painting and a lot of that type of, with oils, watercolors, stuff like that, and studying art history a lot. So I think it was probably a combination of things that got me into the refracted light and the refracted images. Since then, I've spent a lot of time just capturing the landscape here in Fairhaven, out on Buzzard's Bay and on Vineyard Sound. I take photographs of the same 2 locations and have been for about 30 years now. So, there's thousands and thousands of photographs of Little Bay, which is on the Mattapoisett side of Fairhaven. And it's in every weather pattern. It's astonishing when I look at the breadth of the images, and the things that have happened, the changes in the salt marsh itself. It's disintegrated because of the global warming and all of the rest. And it's all kind of documented in the photographs. And then, of course, across the street, there's New Bedford Outer Harbor and the Elizabeth Islands, and I can see Aquina and Gay Head light from there. And, so I love going back to the same place because it's always different. There are never 2 photographs that are the same. The clouds are different. The timing is different.
Is your point of view, your where you put your sticks, where you put your tripod, is it always the same spot?
No, it's not the same spot.
Yeah.
I actually like the fact that I'm able to chase the sunset all the way through all the seasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the summer, it's almost dead north,
Mm-hmm.
The sun setting. And this time of year, it is way, way down by Dartmouth. So it's a huge, huge area that it covers. And quite quickly, it's funny because the Unitarian Church steeple is one of the things that is very visible from the beach that I go to. And one day I got it with the sunset behind the Unitarian Church steeple, but it moved so quickly that it was only one day out of all of that.
Yeah, I was speaking to a friend of mine about plein air painting, which
Yes.
seems to have had a revival. And I don't know, but I know in this area, the pandemic seemed to have really
Yep.
kicked up plein air, and not just individuals, but groups of people who are in contact but not in contact. They can see each
Nice.
other and they
Yes.
spread out and they're painting for, sometimes it's there's like a competitive or a contest
Yep.
aspect to it.
Yep.
I know the Dartmouth Cultural Center does the wet paint thing where you pretty much have X amount of time to execute your piece, photograph it, upload it to a website for judging, and which is kind of cool.
Oh,
But
that's nice.
yeah, yeah. And we were talking about landscape painting and the the average person who has no academic training or has never put their hand, to canvas, so to speak, doesn't realize that it's running a treadmill because the sun was over there,
Yeah.
15 minutes ago, and now you're
Right.
going, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And the wind has shifted, and yeah. Yeah. I love that because you are capturing something that's timeless,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
cannot be rooted in time. Cannot be
Yeah.
rooted.
You really have to place yourself mentally in the past, the present, and in the future. Because the future, you have to anticipate what that future is going to be. And then
Yes.
you have to be happy about what is
They came up
what
with.
you did in the past, right? It's the weirdest thing. I was just thinking about your all of your photographs of Little Bay. I wonder what they would look like if you took them and put them into one of those morphing programs where, the one made famous by Michael Jackson, and you could
Yep.
just see the morphing of the landscape as it goes over the years.
It would be pretty awesome. I know the disintegration of the salt marsh has changed even the way the water is viewed tremendously. So, fortunately on the other shore, there's nature preserve. So the same trees that I was looking at 25 years ago are still there, which is pretty impressive. I've watched a lot of things come and go. There was a huge osprey nest that was there for about 10 years, then blew over in one of the hurricanes, one of the winter storms. And,
Mm,
there's a lot to the cycles of life that you see just out in this little area.
yeah. I mean, I know walking with Daisy, our American foxhound, going down to Fort Phoenix. I love
Yes,
this area because it's 10 minutes to get to the bike path and about 10 minutes to get to the fort. And
right.
walking down 4th Street, you could see out of the harbor, you can see the lighthouse. And then depending on the time of day, it's amazing because the islands, some days you could actually see contrast in the islands.
Yes,
Um, I've done it just at the right time where you could actually see the house lights going on and street lights and
yeah. Isn't
cars
it
moving.
beautiful? Yes, yeah,
So that means that air is completely pristine all the way out there.
yeah, yeah.
And then there's the floating islands
Right,
effect.
right. Yeah, right.
They look like they're floating. And I've seen a couple of other things out there that I just can't quite um, rationalize. There was this object that was way too large to be moving that fast.
Yep.
So I don't know what what I really saw. It could have just been an
Funny.
optical illusion, but it is this thing to go back to nature is really important. Now you mentioned, at the very beginning about your name and Spain.
Yeah.
Uh, you said you went over during college. You've maintained a relationship out there, so to speak, with the country, the
Oh
people.
my God. It started when I was 6 or 7. My parents took on a Venezuelan student for what was supposed to be a week of indoctrination before he went off to Brandeis. And it became a lifelong relationship. So when I was 17, my first plane flight was to Caracas.
Wow.
And yeah, and I got hooked on traveling and Latin America. And later on, I had a job that had me going to Europe and to Asia at least once a year, and traveling throughout the United States. So 37 countries, and
Wow.
many of them, 4, 5, 7, or 8 times. So I lived in Norway for a while, learned to speak Norwegian while I was there. So I've learned to speak Spanish and Norwegian.
Yeah, well, living in Fairhaven, that comes in handy too.
It does.
For the old timers anyway,
I
right?
can order breakfast.
Yeah. Or you can go into the Euro store.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's both places are beautiful. And yeah, I've traveled a lot throughout Latin America, and as well as a lot throughout Europe. Obviously, I studied art history, and so the two things I love to do when I'm traveling in Europe are going to churches and going into museums. There's no shortage of either one of them.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Travel changes you, doesn't it?
It has for me. This Venezuelan student that came into our house brought in culture, it brought in art, he brought in music, love of the opera. It changed my whole life in the trajectory that it took because of his knowledge and his influences. And obviously being 17 and going to Venezuela, it was a time where it was like Dubai. There was just so much wealth and so much beautiful art and just so much going on. It was just an incredibly exciting time, and I'm so glad that I got a chance to see that.
That whole concept of Pan-American was trying to really get up on its hind legs, so to speak, and they were successful, more so perhaps in sports and arts than anything else. The government's
Right.
unfortunately.
Yeah, well, that was it. Was that everything's kind of gone and slipped backwards, but culturally, the music, the art, all the rest, really affected me a great deal.
Dealing more with this as a cultural subject, or under the heading of culture versus politics. It seems like the education or the educational system of these other countries is far more, I'm going to use that word, superior to ours when it comes to things beyond the nuts and bolts, MCAS preparation, so on and so forth. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, so I'm thinking of the Norwegian and the Venezuelan, which are the two that I know the best. And the Norwegian, actually, they went to 13 grades before their high school ended. And they were very, very, very well educated. The Venezuelan, was much more focused around cultural, musical, that type of thing. The formal education was less formal than, say, here or in Norway. It was two different, very contrasting cultures that I kind of learned to live with. And the thing with Venezuela was just that there was always music in the air. There was always beautiful things to see, flowers and stuff like that. Whereas the Norwegian was a tough landscape. It's a tough. When I arrived there, they really hadn't quite gotten out of the recovering from the Second World War. They were still, the cannery in town that canned the fish had shut down, and there weren't any jobs. And this is before their oil and their salmon fishing and farming and all the rest. And what I saw was a country that was really trying to get to the next step. And my God, what they've done in the last 30 years. It's just all of the friends that I had that were in high school left this small town to go to other places for employment. They've all come back because the Norwegian government has spread the employment up and down the coast. So in the town that I lived in, they have a registry of deeds for the entire country, and everybody's employed. And the Norwegian government has just spread out all of the bureaucracy that we've got in Washington, D.C. They've spread it out across the country and put in a hospital within easy reach of every resident. And it's just a kind of an amazing thing that they've done in my lifetime. Changed it from a place where the fish cannery shut down to where everyone is well off and nobody really is in that much of a need.
I found that when I lived in Portugal. Now most of my traveling had been from here to the family farm up in Quebec, which is on the Gaspé in Quebec, and
Mhm.
I did some business travel out to Seattle, and I went to University of Miami. So, but it was it was more than some and a lot less than others.
Yeah,
And then I moved to Portugal. The intent was to stay there, and I was quite amazed. I don't know if it's because of the artist's sensibility, but yes, the country is very, very old. Many of the cities obviously are very, very old, but resources are scarce, and even
Mm,
space, for land. Houses are chock-a-block to each other.
yeah.
They don't waste an enormous amount of time on front lawns, or what they call, what is it, the ship in the sea of green. This term that landscapers use that. And because of this scarcity or scarcity of space, um, they got to be quite inventive,
Right.
and they were able to put, while I was living in that city, Figueira da Foz, which is in central Portugal. It's called the Costa de Prata, the Silver Coast. It's almost dead in the middle of Portugal. Porto and Lisbon are almost equidistant from Figueira.
Mhm.
Um, it was almost like spider trap garages. I mean, you'd be walking and all of a sudden you see this door lift up out of the ground, and boop, there's a big ramp, and there's parking, and it's out
That's
of sight.
wild.
It's
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
that and so much more. And everything seems to be much, this is America, the land of plenty. I mean, we grew
Right.
up with that in our heads, and unfortunately it's also wasteful. We're so wasteful of everything that we have. Space, resources,
It is
time.
funny. Yeah, no, we have a lot of resources, but again, I go back to Little Bay. They're running out. The clock is ticking.
Yeah.
They can't go back and replace the salt marsh that's gone now.
No, no. I mean, I think global warming is, to simplify it, two things. One, it's a natural cycle.
Yeah.
The last ice age we had, I think, was in the 17th century in New England.
Mhm.
And previous to that, it was 200 years earlier in Europe,
Right.
300 years earlier. That's why the chimney was invented, because it was so darn cold. There's an interesting story about the development of the chimney. Prior to that, they didn't have them. It was
I
just a
didn't
hole in
know
the
that.
roof, Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, there is a cyclical element, but I was having a conversation with someone today. Is like 10, 15 years ago, if you looked at photographs of street scenes in China, and this is nothing disparaging about Asia and China specifically, you would see throngs of people on bicycles.
Mhm.
Now, present day, you take photographs and they've got gridlock that makes Boston look like a party.
Right. Right.
And people see that and say, "Oh, look at that traffic, it's awful." Well, my point is, all those automobiles coming into being and all that stuff spewing into the air. So we've just had this explosion of added garbage
Yes. Yeah.
filling the
Yeah.
air.
Yeah.
I met with another photographer today, Gary James Farias, and he said he and his wife were in Calcutta, and they're both non-smokers, and coincidentally she had an annual physical, and when they checked her lungs, they're like, "Whoa, what the heck is going on here?" She's like, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "It's a mess in there." And she's like, you know
That's
just from that
scary.
short stay in Calcutta. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um when you were on your travels and people asked you what you did, and you said you were a photographer, did you get a different reaction when you were asked by someone in the United States versus someone in South America or Europe?
You know, it's funny because I have such a lasting impression of the first time I was actually doing a pencil sketch in Venice, Italy, and a group of Russian soldiers came walking by, and it was the first time I'd ever seen a Russian, and they were very bold. They came over and asked me what I was doing, and they really kind of insisted that it was a hobby. That was what was stuck in their mind, was that it was a hobby. And they told me as such, and it was one of those unforgettable moments. You know, it was about 4 or 5 Russian soldiers. But yeah, and honestly, I don't know why they had it, why they were so stuck on it being a hobby, because to me it's a way of life. You know, I carry the camera with me everywhere, and the best photographs I've ever gotten are not always the ones that are planned, but the ones that occur in front of me. And that was even in high school. I carried a camera everywhere. I'd walk to school, which was a couple miles, with a camera with me. And you just don't know. You know, some of the amazing weather events that you see aren't necessarily, you know, when you've got you know, all 5 of my cameras on set to go. You know, it's a lot of times now with the Android, I can just grab a shot of things that otherwise would go uncaptured. But yeah,
Timing is also, I mean,
yeah,
when you see
timing is everything.
something that, or that voice in your head is screaming, take the photograph, you don't have the time to argue. It's either you take it or you lose it, because I mean, I'm not a photographer. My
Yeah.
dad was a hobbyist photographer. A friend of mine who's an executive television producer saw some of my dad's 8mm film work, and he said, "Oh my God, your father was so far advanced in his camera handling. It's absolutely, he's doing moves that wouldn't come up for another 30 years."
Nice.
And he just had, you know, we've got these snapshots of, you know, Thanksgiving and stuff, and I swear some of them probably inspired Rockwell, just the way they were composed. So
Right.
he had a
Right.
natural ability to compose things, you know. And it's that moment. This, you know, I've got friends who are like,
Yeah.
"Oh, gonna photograph the sunset." And it's like, "Oh, damn, missed it," you know.
Not necessarily. Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I do know that I will anticipate. You know, I'll look through the lens and see and wait for that moment when things balance out, where compositionally everything matches. I had a friend who had a powerboat, and he talked about the fact that the photograph I took, his wife was on board, and she was coiling a line. And I knew exactly what he was talking about, even though I wasn't looking at the photograph, because I waited for her to do the perfect coil before I snapped the shutter. And it was perfectly balanced. And that's an instinctive part of good photography, is anticipating and then holding for that 2 seconds or 3 seconds until everything comes in alignment, and then
It's
getting
like
the shot.
the Wayne Gretzky philosophy of be where the puck is going to be,
Yeah,
applied
exactly.
to photography, right? Going
Exactly.
back to the cultural thing, I mean, as a photographer, so the reaction may be a little bit different, you know, obviously with the Russian soldiers, but their, you know, culture really does
Yeah,
frame
sure. Yeah.
attitudes and behaviors and so on and so forth. I remember the first time living in Portugal, when someone says, "So what do you do?" And I, at that point in my life, part of the reason for being there in Portugal was I was going to paint and, you know, find myself some galleries and exhibit and so on and so forth. Something I had put
Mhm.
off, being in advertising for decades. It was still art, but it wasn't art.
Right,
And the
right.
reaction was always the same. "You're a painter? Have I seen your work? Is it currently hanging anywhere in town? Is it in a book? Do you have a website?"
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, wow. Here it's like, "Oh, you make any money doing that?"
Right, right. Well,
Uh,
it's funny. I spent 4.5 years at Pairpoint Crystal engraving glass. And one of the things that I discovered was that I could not be creative 24 hours a day. You know, I was creative in spurts, but going into work every day and working 8 hours at glass engraving and cutting crystal, um, there's an element of labor to that. And I see the same element of labor to Rembrandt's paintings and all the rest. Once you've planned it all out, the rest is work.
it's execution. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and the two are different. I know that even with photography, going into the darkroom can tremendously alter a photograph. Today it's with Photoshop, but it's still the same. It's still finessing and teasing, highlights and things like that. But yeah, it was an interesting 4.5 years I spent at Pairpoint and just painting. I was painting oil portraits on the Cape and doing the engraving. And
That was the sandwich location?
yes, exactly.
Okay. All
That was
right.
back after it had left New Bedford.
That's under the, well, not, well,
Right.
kind of
Yeah,
under the
but
bridge. Yeah. Yeah.
tucked by the Saginaw
Right.
Bridge.
Right.
And it's funny because I left that and went back into high tech, and I've been in high tech marketing ever since. And caught the wave of the internet and all of that, and have loved that because that has been another source of creativity for me. So now I embrace social media with a passion. It is my gallery, and Facebook and Instagram are the ways that people can see my work instantaneously.
Hmm.
Every once in a while I'll do a Facebook Live sunset from the beach, and get a whole bunch of people taking part in it, enjoying the sunset that are nowhere near a beach and nowhere near, perhaps
Yeah.
even the same time zone.
Yeah. The landlocked, it's funny because I mean, after all that time in advertising, I mean, I remember when I met my wife, Paula, when I had all these plans to go to Portugal, and I had no idea that she would become. I'm pretty much a Virgo, OCD, plan everything out kind of guy.
Right.
Not a real freak about it, but she might have some other ideas about that. But the first words out of my mouth, because I was asked to interview her. I was working at a friend's advertising agency. It was a fledgling agency, and I was the old man, so I was giving him benefit of my vast years of experience. And he's quite successful. My wife still works for him. And the first words out of my mouth is like, "Oh, so you come from the days of wax and razor blades too?" And she's like, "Yeah." And because I remember the biggest crisis that you could start off your day with is like, who shut off the wax machine? Because you'd never be able to get those galleys and run them through. And then teaching at UMass, teaching marketing and advertising, and utilizing the technology to support my classes before the university completely embraced it. But it got really tiresome because no sooner did you learn a language, so to speak, to put it in that perspective,
Sure.
it would change and change
Yes.
and change.
Constant
and
change.
constant change.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's to a point now where I've had this conversation with my gallery in Detroit and said, I just want a partnership. I'm that age. I'm not the doe-eyed kid anymore who's like, oh, I have a gallery.
Yeah.
To me, having a gallery means that you see the potential, cut and dry, cold-blooded. I can make a few bucks off this guy. And that's really the core, the crux of our relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because no warm and fuzzies is going to be selling painting for either way. Paintings either way.
Right. Right.
So, and I said, what's important is that you take over all the marketing, because I don't want to do it anymore. I marketed all kinds of products, but when it comes to myself, it's like I always tell people, I can't see the tip of my nose. Can you? Of course you can see the tip of my nose, but can you see the tip of your nose? That's my point.
Yeah.
I'm too close to, I don't have the perspective
Yeah.
to do that.
No, I agree with you completely about that. I've never really tried to market my own things. I've marketed a lot of technology products over the years, but it's a different game.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it doesn't stop. You know, I was learning the internet before the web really existed. And so I was programming pages, web pages, because there was no authoring software. So I would write an HTML page in
Right.
raw code.
That was like
Took,
ARPANET, wasn't it? Is
well,
that
that was
what it was called
ARPANET.
before?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually got a special permit through the state of New Hampshire that allowed me to get an internet connection, because you couldn't even get one as such. This was long before America Online offered it and all the rest.
Yeah.
You know, it was just, so yeah, I spent about 25 years developing a website that was very, very deep and very dense. And unfortunately, web.com pulled the plug on it. They said they were sending me notices, but I never got any of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
The website's gone now. I'll
Yeah.
have
It's
to
amazing.
reconstruct it. But
The evolution of it, even in your career in photography. It's funny because when you said your first camera, I expected you to say you got a Brownie. You know,
yeah, no, I think it was a Pentax.
it was a Pentax. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Pentax.
it was a cheap
Was
single lens reflex.
was it that a Korean product at that time? Because I know a lot of soldiers
Yeah,
what they call a walkover.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. It was a foreign company. I don't know where it was made, but yeah, it was the least expensive 35 millimeter camera that I could have, I could possibly get. And
Yeah.
I lived with that thing for years. I think it finally got worn out. I've got a collection of old film cameras now, but I'm going all digital. At this point, I've been taking digital photographs for probably about 15 years now. Wish I'd really done 20 years, because the digital is just so much easier to store and manipulate and handle.
That's true. That's true. Now, how did you feel when the digital age started to encroach on photography?
Well, I was already up to my elbows in the web and internet and all the rest. So I actually held on to a film camera well into the 2000s. So I was slow in getting there, even though I was working in social media, had a Twitter account and a Facebook account and LinkedIn account and all the rest. But I wasn't utilizing it to its full potential until, 2010 or so. I started really getting serious about posting stuff and treating it as a gallery as opposed to just as a place to. I remember when I started using Twitter that nobody posted photographs to Twitter. And that's all I was doing, was posting my photographs, daily photos on Twitter. And now it's all images. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and we're moving to motion. It's going from still images now to motion. And I'm seeing with Instagram that they're offering to add music to your still images or your motion images. So it's becoming much more of a multimedia experience. And that's the direction it's going in right now. But God knows what it's going to be in 5 years. Just I love the challenge. I love keeping up with it. I love the freshness and the vitality of it, and the ability to reach out to thousands of people in a heartbeat. That to me is the ultimate kind of gallery for being able to express yourself, as opposed to setting up a formal show or whatever. That I mentioned before, I kind of go through phases. In the summer I sail, so they're all sailing photographs of Buzzards Bay and Vineyard Sound. And this time of year, all my amaryllis are blooming. And so I'm taking abstract photographs of all the flowers, the colors, the lighting and the shade as the sunlight comes through the flower petals. And so each season has its own kind of subject for me. I love spring and getting the crocuses and the daffodils and the tulips. It's the other thing I did, and my first website was actually just solely based on Christmas images, pictures of Christmas. And so I've been photographing Christmas scenes now for over 30 years and have, this wonderful collection of images. So on my social media, I just finished, I started right at Thanksgiving and went right through till Christmas. So a Christmas image every day on Facebook and on Instagram. Included Twitter too, but Facebook was the, and I love doing it because makes people happy and they enjoy it. It's something they anticipate. It's almost like a super advent calendar, where people each day are looking forward to what is going to be posted.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
a lot of people get involved, which you can't really do in a static gallery. They can comment, they can
Yeah.
forward it, they can do things with it. So, when I've touched somebody to the point where they feel that it's moved them, they will share it, they will comment on it, they will, express themselves. And that really is what we're all about, right? Sharing an image. Hey, look, this is what I saw. And then having that being able to be shared across the globe in an instant is just stunning to me. It's
Yeah.
beyond what I could have ever imagined when I started this journey. When I picked up my first camera, I would never have guessed that in a second, in a heartbeat, I could get that photograph out to anybody in the world who had, a phone on them.
Now, how has all of this availability of visual resources affected you as an artist, as a photographer? Because I mean, back in the old days, you'd go through a book and say, "Oh, I like this guy's style. Oh, look at Avedon, he's got a new book." Or,
Yeah. Well, it's my thing. I mean, that's the whole thing that I learned when I started off at Framingham State in the fine arts, and I
Mhm.
learned I didn't like graphic arts. I didn't like having to do, something that I didn't like, didn't think was attractive, whatever. I think we've all gone through that period where you do graphic design and, there's somebody who knows nothing about art that's telling you what to do. And, you would really want to just bury this in the garbage. Um, where I'm at now is that I'm free to express myself however I want. The images are mine.
Yeah.
I don't have somebody that's controlling it. So they come from me more honestly. Um, and I really wouldn't want to have to be beholden to, a certain area. Like, a lot of artists can get caught up in having to be Cape Cod or having to be Martha's Vineyard. It all has to be beaches on the vineyard or, and
Boats in water. Yeah.
yeah, and I don't need to do that. I can jump from one to the other. And then let the viewer decide. I mean, people have reached out and contacted me and bought my photos online.
Hmm.
It's easy enough to do, but it's not the primary reason I do it. It's really important for me to just share with the world what I'm seeing, and that really is the beauty of the photography. It's so instantaneous, and it's so untouched.
They just well, this past month, the best photographs of 2022, and some of the things are just jaw dropping, but they always have been. It's that
Yeah, yeah,
being in that moment at that, like you said, anticipating, having your
exactly.
finger hovering over the trigger, so to speak.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. Yeah, I twice now I've encountered sea turtles while I was sailing. First time I was
Hmm.
sure I was going to hit a rock. But the second time I had the camera with me and we were both going along in the same direction. First time it was in opposite directions. I was on Vineyard Sound and I waited and sailed alongside the sea turtle and got some spectacular photographs of this turtle in the water. And it was stunning and it was overwhelming because it was such a connection with something that I would never have seen otherwise. And yeah, I just love that kind of thing. And again, I was anticipating. I wasn't taking photographs, from 40 feet away. I waited until I was close by the turtle and the boat was well enough away from it that it wasn't going to hurt the turtle. But then I got some great photos, and then
Yeah.
found out that they track them. There's a website that just tracks turtles on the Cape.
Oh,
There's
that's pretty cool.
a map, and there are thousands and thousands of turtles sighted every summer on the Cape, around the
Well,
Cape.
that's a good thing. It's better than hundreds of because it's just been so much. I mean, you
Yeah,
see
yeah.
these entanglements, and
Well, that was the
it's
first question they asked me
mm,
because I did call in the sighting, and they asked me, was the turtle damaged? Was he, caught up in anything, or so. But again, I just stumbled into this whole world of people who watch sea turtles. I didn't. Yeah, it's amazing the path you can take in life.
Yeah, or sometimes it's that moment that just presents itself. Friends in Miami, I went to the University of Miami. They were all on the boat, and there was a pod of dolphins, and they were
Oh God.
having a blast shooting them.
Yeah.
And just at, I think it was Lourdes, Steve's wife. Steve, his claim to fame is he was the former Channel 5 art director. His logo has
Oh,
been up
okay.
there for like 50 years, the Channel 5 logo.
Nice.
And she took a photograph and realized, oh my God, I just caught the launch of the latest shot going out of Canaveral with these
Wow.
dolphins. It
Nice.
was on a phone, but
Yep.
and she caught it, and she said, without even anticipating or realizing until later, that she caught the separation of the rocket from
Yes.
the
Right.
stages.
First stage. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it's like,
Amazing. Amazing.
got to be
Yeah.
there, right?
Well, that's funny because one of the last space shuttle launches, somebody caught it from an airplane window, and what an astonishing shot. It's framed by, the airplane window, and you can see the shuttle in the air, and it's like, wow.
Yeah,
It's
my
just something.
brother was coming back from a deployment. It was the 4th of July, and he said it was amazing to be up there, coming in on the approach and seeing fireworks. It looked like they were landing in a war zone.
Yeah, that's very cool. Looking down on them, yeah.
Looking down on the whole thing. Yeah, exactly. What's in the future for you?
Well, I'm working right now for a cybersecurity company out of San Diego, and enjoying it tremendously, and continuing to take photos, launching the boat in the springtime, and I'll be back out on the Vineyard and Buzzards Bay and Vineyard Sound taking photos. So more of the same, and keeping up with the changes in technology. Like I said, social media is changing quickly. We're going to, not only motion, but also sound and all the rest. So who knows where it stops.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it. I think it was shot 2 years ago, this documentary, Social Dilemma. It's on Netflix.
Okay.
It's kind of well, we didn't mean for it to happen this way. We were just a bunch of guys, with this brand new thing, and
Right.
it was like, oh my God, the vestiges of this development, what it's created.
Yeah, no controlling it once it's out of the bottle. No.
Yeah, the genie's long gone. Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, it's astonishing to me that, again, that instant connectivity, where my friends in Norway are liking a photograph 10 seconds after I posted it. That's just astonishing. It shrunk the world so tremendously compared to when I was a child.
I think one of the turning points, one of the plateaus, for lack of a better term, would be the O.J. Simpson trial.
Yeah.
Where news could not be vetted because it was happening almost live, and it was, the editors. There was, coming from advertising, everything used to be double checked, triple checked. I mean, now you see media, professional journalists and broadcasters. And even if you're not a great speller, it's like, hey, that's not how that's spelled, or, and then as we find out after, oh, we didn't fact check this enough.
Yeah.
Because
there is that whole issue. Yeah, it's unfiltered. The unfiltered aspect is something that, obviously we need to be more careful about, because you're getting just on the internet, you get all kinds of information. You have no idea what's accurate, what's inaccurate,
And sometimes it's so believable that you just assume it to be so. I mean, we've seen that happen also with history. Friends, there are people who, there are a couple of things in New Bedford history, primarily the Monkey Fire, which no one has ever been able to prove, but some people believe it's a myth, or that's been taken as fact. The Ark, which was the House of Ill Repute, which was in the hulk of an old whaling vessel that they think was actually floating around.
Yes.
And then I posted something from the New England Historical Society, yesterday about Frederick Douglass,
Mhm.
and a local historian said that thing's loaded with mistakes. You know, and I said back, I read through it and I was like, I don't remember it that way. Maybe I'm just getting older and I can't, and I don't remember it that
Yeah.
way. That's probably why I didn't remember it that way, because it was skewed. Somebody takes something that's published as fact from someone who took something that was published as fact. So now you
Right.
have this growing
Filter.
snowball of
Yeah.
misinformation and no filters. Yeah, that's for sure. We're gonna wrap this up, and before we do, any do-overs? I promised you that I wouldn't ask you a Barbara Walters. I almost said Barbara Wawa, and only
Yeah, well,
people
this
of a certain
SNL.
age would know that. Yeah. If you were a tree, what kind of a tree would you be? But if you had anything to do over, if you had that one wish from the genie who was really cheap with wishes and only offered you one wish, and that one wish could only be a do-over, what would that do-over be?
Ron, I'm very fortunate. I don't have a bucket list. I've been fortunate in my career to go places and do things that I'm full of gratitude for the life I've lived. And the ability to still capture things and still be cognizant of the changes in the world and all the rest. Yeah, no, I'm full of gratitude for the life I've had.
I mean, just getting to know you on this podcast, you're very even. You have multiple interests. They all seem to meld together, and you just seem happy by it. It's not like I got to do this and I got to do that. It's like I want to do this. I want to do that.
Exactly. Yeah. I love walking my dog on the beach and taking the camera with me.
Yeah. You never know what you're going to see.
That's the joy in my life. Yeah. Sharing it with friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the most overlooked aspects of photography is its shareability.
Yes. Well, especially today.
Yeah, people really don't think of it as sharing. They just think of it as, oh, that's documentation. Somebody documented or captured this, but they don't really think of it as sharing. I do genealogy, and had a cousin that reconnected, and she had a drawer full of photographs. And I always imagined, we had this conversation, that imagine being at a wedding reception or several wedding receptions or weddings over the years, and you have people photographing from one side of the room, and people photographing from the other side of the room, and you're both in the same room, but the perspectives of the photographs is so completely different.
It's funny. I've gone on photo shoots with other photographers, and it's amazing how different the images can come out, even though you're standing in the same spot. Exactly.
Well, Dana Pablo.
Yeah, right.
I really want to thank you for agreeing to be on this podcast. It's been great. I hope we can meet in person at some point in time.
Well, certainly, Ron. I appreciate your offer,
and best of luck to you. It's funny because I'm down at the fort. I'm not as deep into the water as you are, down on Sconneconeck, but and I do have a couple of friends that are photographers down there. Richie Souza, I think he's pretty much retired, and John Robson, that I've known since he I would say since before he was born. His parents were good friends of my father. And I remember when his mom came over from Norway. So
nice. Yeah, everything interconnects if you wait long enough, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what is the 7 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much. And folks, that wraps up another episode of the Artist Index with our guest today, Dana Pablo Morris, or just Dana Morris, the folks on this side of the hemisphere. And with that in mind, we hope to see you next time. And we're thankful for the Mass Cultural Council and its local agent, the Fairhaven Cultural Council, for allowing us to focus on this series of 5 podcasts of contemporary Fairhaven artists. Thanks so much. See you later. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.